Hi, they say that Ayurveda finds you, you don't find it. And today I've found Mouli Mackenzie, who's talking to us about all things Ayurvedic. This is Town Crier. This book about Ayurveda leapt out of the shelves at me at a second-hand bookshop in Myrtleford last Saturday. And it's 1 week later that I find myself with Mouli Mackenzie, a Drew Ayurvedic health coach, a senior international tutor in yoga and meditation. Mouli, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a great delight to be here with you, John. Thank you.
Thank you. And when I opened this book, the first thing I read, I opened it randomly, and the first thing I read is, Ayurveda is the world's oldest system for the preservation of health and the prevention and elimination of disease. It dates back to 6000 BC.
Yes, well, initially that's when the knowledge was downloaded, if you like, by ancient sages. So if we go back through the mists of time, way back then it was a golden era when people were much healthier and much more connected to nature and the cycles of nature. But the sages could see forward into the future, into our time, which is the age of Kali, the age of forgetfulness. And we have forgotten a lot of our roots and a lot of the original knowledge that those people had during the Satya Yuga. And so the sages went into deep meditation to really find the pure knowledge that they could then pass on for future generations of how to maintain health and longevity. I mean, what Ayurveda means is Ayur is life, longevity, and Veda is the knowledge. The wisdom was written down in the Vedas. And so it is the wisdom and the knowledge for maintaining health and wellness and well-being and a sense of being in touch with who you really are so that you can live at your fullest and your highest.
Can you take us through the 5 elements that Ayurveda is based on?
Yeah. Okay, so there's a few fundamental principles that underlie how Ayurveda works and why it works. And so it goes back to the Sankhya philosophy, which is the same philosophy that underpins yoga and Ayurveda. They're like sister sciences. And so the belief, the understanding is that everything in the known universe is created from the same 5 elements. So that's air, space, air, fire, water and earth. And those elements have different qualities. So, for example, the earth is about solidity and steadiness and groundedness and also nurturing. And water flows, and fire is a transformative element, and of course it's hot. And each of the elements is more subtle than the one before. So air is more subtle, and it represents the life force that flows within us. And then there's the space in which everything moves. And so Ayurveda understood that if everything is made of those same elements, then everything has the ability to affect everything else. So in a either therapeutic way or a detrimental way, because they understood that when we're born, we have a certain combination of those elements within us, and that's like our original unique blueprint, like our DNA, and they're called doshas, and you've probably heard the 3 words Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. I mean, most people who've heard about Ayurveda know those words. Yes. And what they refer to is the amount of each element within you. So someone who is predominantly Vata dosha has a lot of air and space within them. And so
I think that would be me. I've often been told I've got it full of air and
hot air. Beautiful. Well, we all, of course, have everything. And then fire is when you get a little bit fiery. So in my middle years, I think I got a little bit fiery and intense, and working with balancing that now. And then if you have a lot of, that's the Pitta dosha. And then the Kapha dosha is the elements of water and earth. So they're the rock of the earth, the solid people, the ones you can rely on, very loyal.
So are you saying that those elements can change though through your life?
Yes, that's what dosha means. So dosha actually means that which changes or a fault. So
Wow.
So our true nature is what we were born with.
Yes.
But everything that happens to us in every moment, whatever food we eat, what the season it is, what the environment is, the people who are around us, what we're doing, everything affects those doshas. Because if you think about it, our Western world, it's a very fast-paced world, isn't it? Everything's in bite-sized chunks. There's screens and lights everywhere. There's people rushing everywhere. That increases the vata element, which is about air and space and being mobile and moving too fast. And so if you're inside you, if the element of vata increases, we call that a vata aggravation. And to keep healthy, you need to keep everything, those doshas, in the balance that you had when you were born. But that's because
that's not always possible.
No, you'd be an enlightened being almost if you were back to that state.
Because you're buffeted around by life circumstances.
Exactly. And we also make choices of what to do in certain situations. And if our body wisdom isn't really working for us, we can make the choice that actually aggravates our dosha. So Ayurveda works on two principles, that like attracts like and opposites balance. So if you think about yourself in your original blueprint, and life has created where you're a businessman and you're living in London and it's really, really busy and you have a very stressful job, that's all going to be aggravating the vata and the pitta. The pitta getting too hot and overheated and frustrated. And then if you are a little bit out of balance, your pitta's risen and you've got very intense, you might make the choice to miss lunch to finish the project. So you're being driven, and so the fire element is, that choice increased the fire element. And then if you decided you'd go to a yoga class to calm down, but you drove really fast to get to the yoga class and skidded in there, it's all aggravating. But the choice to do a yoga class was a good idea. But maybe if your body wisdom is out of balance a lot, it might pick a Bikram yoga class, which is heating, which would put your pitta out even more.
In the book, the Vedas suggest you would eat a light breakfast. You wouldn't miss lunch in the scenario that you just described. In fact, you would have a relaxing, good midday meal.
Yes. This is one of the other principles. So as well as like attracts like and opposites balance, the key thing is aligning ourselves with natural cycles. And so just like people have those elements within them, the doshas within them, the times of the day have a combination of those doshic elements within them. And so the reason that they say eat a good meal at midday in a relaxed way is that at midday we're in the pitta dosha, which is the fire element at the times of the day. And there's 6 periods through the day. So early morning is vata, air and space, in the quiet time before the world gets going. Then we move into the kapha time of day, which is the grounding part where it's really good to do exercise and farmers get up and do their work. Then in the midday period, it's the pitta period. And what's important about this is the sun is the highest in the sky. So it's the fire in the sky is high, and our digestive fire is at its peak. And so you want to eat your main meal when you know that your digestion is strong enough to digest it. So it's a little bit different to the age-old wisdoms of the Western world, where we often hear it said, breakfast, eat like a king, lunch, eat like a prince, and supper, eat like a pauper. Just the first 2 are round the other way with Ayurveda, because we want to eat that main meal when our digestive fire is strongest. And there is a reason, but I can see you've got a question, so you go first.
No, sorry. No, you go on. All I wanted to jump in there was ask, because when people say I'm not a morning person, I hit my peak at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever. So what's going on with them?
So what's going on with them could be many things, but the 4 o'clock in the afternoon peak is in the Vata time, which is the air and the space. And so if you're a creative person, that's when your creativity is highest. And so it could simply be that. It could be that they are not getting enough restful sleep, and so they wake up in the morning and they don't feel rested, and that could be many reasons, but one of them could be that they ate too big a meal the night before, so that their digestion hadn't completed by the time they went to bed, so that instead of in the pitta time at night time, when the liver, which is a fire-based organ, and your metabolic fires in your body are processing the toxins and clearing out the waste. If the food was eaten too late, they're still digesting, so you don't get the waste clearance cycle. So when you wake up in the morning, the body hasn't had time to repair and process everything and get the waste ready to be eliminated. So you still feel sluggish. So it's all connected. You can see how everything affects our health and well-being at every point.
Yes, prior to going on to camera, you were talking we were talking about the importance of digestion.
Yes, yeah.
And you mentioned this. You had this analogy for fires, like ashes in your tummy. Can you?
Yes, I'll certainly share that. So in Ayurveda, we say that it's not about what you eat that makes you who you are, but what you digest. And so the really important thing is that your digestive fire is healthy and strong and can burn up all the food that you take in and extract the nutrients. Fire is the transformative element within the body. So all the metabolic processes, the digestion, that's monitored by your digestive fire, which is called Dattara Agni. But there's 40 fires in the body for every metabolic process. And so if your main fire, the digestive fire, is working well, it's really potentially likely that the other fires are working well. And it's just like if you think about an ordinary fire, I like to think about a wood-burning stove and how when you put the right fuel on to get the fire going. So my dad taught me how to roll bits of paper up and make nuggets and then put the kindling on and then put the middle-sized logs and then the bigger logs and then you light the fire. The preparation is good. The fuel that you've put on is good. You open up the air so that the fire can catch and burn. And then when it's burning, you stop the air down and you put the right kind of wood on. So if you put damp wood on and it's too big, it's going to dampen the fire. And that's the same with our digestion. If you put too big a meal in that's too rich and heavy when your fire's not going well, say early morning when you've only just woken up, then what'll happen is you'll eat all that food, but the digestive fire won't be able to digest it all. So instead of the normal digestive process happening when all the nutrients are separated out, pass into the bloodstream, flow around to nourish all the tissues in your body and the organs, and the waste is put into the lymph system ready to be, or into the colon ready to be disposed of, it doesn't digest properly. So it's not food anymore, but it's not nutrients, and it's like a toxic waste, and it's like in a wood-burning stove, if the fire wasn't turned up enough or the wood was too damp, the wood doesn't burn properly and it leaves like black logs, clinker we used to call it. And you have to actually clear that out before you can light another fire. But if you keep your fuel right and your air intake right, everything that you put in will burn away to a fine ash, and you just rake it through and there's no waste. And that's like our digestive fire. So if we put the right food in for our body, the right fuel, with the right amount of air, breathing properly and keeping everything going, all our channels open, then everything that we take in will be absorbed, digested properly. And that's not just in terms of food, but on every layer of our body. So the physical layer, yes, it's the food that comes in, but we also bring in life force, prana, as we breathe in oxygen. When we are in a situation, we meet people and we can get emotions thrown at us or beautifully given to us. We have to absorb those too. All the information has to be absorbed and digested. Our thoughts, our beliefs, everything has to be digested. And any traumatic experience that we haven't properly digested and let go of, dealt with becomes mental ama or emotional ama. Ayurveda calls that.
Sorry,
yeah, ama. A-M-A. That's the waste, and the fire is Agni, and so Agni and ama, they need to be kept in balance. If our digestive fire is good and strong, then we won't be creating ama on any level. And you know, that's another thing about Ayurveda. It's not just about the physical body, it's about the 5 layers of our body, which I'll just clarify is our physical body, our energetic body, our emotional body. People like Eckhart Tolle call that the pain body, our intellectual body, and then our deep inside, and under Maya Kosha, the bliss layer, what some people call the spirit or the soul, or and it works on all 5 layers and is aware of the balances and imbalances in all 5 layers. So just to come back to the doshas, if you're a Vata person, which is a lot of air and space, and you're getting a bit out of balance, it could be that instead of the positivity of creativity and adaptability, that you become forgetful, and so you might miss a meal.
Yes.
And what happens if you don't put fuel on the fire and it burns right down, and then you put fuel on, but you can't, even if you put new fuel and new air, you can't restoke it unless you start back with the kindling again. Yeah. And so Vata digestion can be very variable. Sometimes it's great, but if you miss too many meals, then it can be irregular. And so you can end up with undigested food. And the Pitta fire, it's the same, they push through. And so they can get burnout, where everything burns up so fast that you can't keep it fueled. And those kind of people can be prone to, what we call burnout on a physical, mental, emotional level. And the Kapha people, they love their food. Kapha is about building and nurturing, and out of balance it can become congestion, and lethargy.
Yes.
Yeah, so the Kapha fire is like a very weak fire. It's like when you've stopped down the air on a wood-burning stove to make it last all night, which is a great feature. They've got incredible determination and can keep going on tasks. But if then they don't open the air up in the morning and put some light fuel on, if they put a heavy breakfast in, say porridge, then their fire's going to stay damp all day, And that's why eating at midday is a really great thing, because you're working with nature. You're working with the cycles of nature, so it's having an effect on you. So you don't have to think about it so much, but if you eat your main meal at midday, that's all going to work well for you. If you want to keep your digestive fire going, you can have hot water with a little bit of ginger and a little bit of lime or lemon juice and a little bit of honey. So they're optional things. I myself have just plain hot water. And it's great because, as I mentioned, we want to keep everything healthy. We want to keep all the channels in the body not being congested and flowing well. And of course, water hydrating is a really important part in that. And cold water, if we have cold water, which is what you mentioned, can put our fire out. So if you just think about having your midday meal but having a glass of sparkling icy water with it, at the same time as you're taking the benefit of having it at midday, you're cancelling out that benefit with the cold water. If that makes sense, you're dimming your digestive fire with the cold water.
Isn't it interesting, because it goes against, it's the opposite of saying, oh, hey, keep cool it. And so in those terms, we think of that as I think of that as cold water is something that's soothing and good for you. Not that hot water isn't, but hot water is more related to a cup of tea or something like that.
Yes, well, we get funny looks when we ask for hot water when we go into a restaurant instead of cold water. But room temperature water is good. It doesn't have to be too hot, but just warm. But again, if your pitta was out of balance, if your fire element was out of balance, then having cooling food and cooling drinks is good, but not necessarily iced water, because it's a shock to the system. And your digestion has to work overtime to compete with it. So they talk about cool as a cucumber. Cucumber's a great thing to cool you down. Watermelon, those kind of things that can calm you without too much of a shock to the system. Yeah.
You know, you mentioned the word burnout earlier, and I think at this time of year, we're filming post-COVID or still in a COVID sort of situation, but also December is always a very, very busy time for Australians generally, and you meet people down the street and how are you going? Oh, I'm so burnt out, I can't believe it. What can Ayurveda do to help to assist that?
Okay, so there is 5 pathways that Ayurveda looks at to help bring people back into balance. It's like every little thing you can do that nudges yourself back into balance is really good. And so if you're really tired and exhausted and feel burned out, it could be either that you're stressed or that your adrenals have been overactive or that you've just done too much physical activity. We really recommend the yogic practices, which includes relaxation. So making time in your day to put in some still points. And relaxation is a really wonderful way to do that. But it could just be sitting with a cup of tea and really coming into the present moment and feeling the cup and drinking that cup of tea and allowing yourself a little still point in the day, which refreshes us and recharges us. And then we can go off into our day. So
can I just comment on that? That in this book, talking about Ayurveda, the author mentioned that importance of, I think he called it spaces in between all the action.
Yes.
So that it's a time of you take yourself away, and and your cup of tea analogy fits right in there. So you just alienate yourself for a minute so that you can just reset. And even if that's just a couple of minutes of mindfulness and the importance of quiet.
Yes. So another really key thing in Ayurveda is spending some time in nature, because nature is a really great healer. And I talked about mental ama, the congestion that can happen in the mind, and with our body, mind and spirit are so connected that when we feel stressed or overwhelmed or burned out, time in nature can be very rejuvenating. And so as much time as we can spend, take your bare feet onto the earth, that will allow the energies of the earth to ground us, to keep us steady, because a lot of the pace in December really hots up, doesn't it? And so just these quiet moments in space, but nature, just taking a 10-minute walk will make a difference. I myself like to get out and walk up either Mount Taylor or Mount Arawang for my quiet time. And even this morning before coming here, I knew that would set my day well. And have favourite little places that I go to that as soon as you get there, you can just drop into the stillness. But even in a busy urban area, you can find points of stillness, and that's exactly what you were saying. It can be as beautiful as a few minutes in a park. Just look at the trees, let your senses absorb nature, and you'll find yourself feeling rebalanced, feeling a little bit centered, and then it's recharging, it's regenerating, it brings the balance back.
There's no Ayurveda. I know diet is one of the pillars
Yes.
of Ayurvedic thinking and principles. But there's no such thing as the Ayurvedic diet, is there? Because it's a different thing for all the different...
That's exactly right. So, as we mentioned before, everything is made up of the elements and therefore has qualities. And so if you're, the diet needs to be unique for you, balanced for you. So there's some things that are generally healthy, like having hot water, but what we add into it can be different for different people. And so you can add the honey, a small raw honey, teaspoon of raw honey, not into hot water or it changes the honey's qualities. Or you can put the ginger in if you want to increase your fire. And it's the same with all food. So knowing what is aggravated at the moment, that's called your Vrikriti. The Prakriti is what you're born with, that blueprint. But what we are out of balance at the moment, knowing what's most out of balance, then you can eat the food that's right for you. So if you're really depleted and exhausted, that's an indication that your Vata is out of balance, that you're no longer grounded and centered, that you've been rushing around too much, that you might be stressed. And you need to calm down and nourish yourself. And so the food for a Vata person is moist and warm, because Vata is cold, and so you want to warm them up. Moist because Vata is dry, and all home cooked is good.
So when you say, just go back, moist and warm, so what are some examples of that?
Well, the Ayurvedic superfood that we all talk about is khichdi, but that's a whole nother, I think that's a whole nother story. But just home cooked food like mashed potato, things that aren't dry, so not potato chips because they're oily, but mashed potato with milk and butter would be very nurturing and creamy. And soups and stews and porridge in the morning, that's for a Vata person. If you're burned out, and that's because you've got too hot and irritated, then you need to have cooling foods. So fruits, which are sweet and nurturing, but cooling at the same time.
Pineapple, watermelon.
Pineapple, not so good because it's a bit acidic and
Yes,
sour.
right.
So each dosha responds to certain tastes, because the tastes are also made up of the elements. And so if your Vata is out of balance, you want to focus on sweet, salty and savoury, sweet, salty and sour. But salty and sour are not great for the Pitta fiery type, because that increases their fire. And so for them, sweet, astringent, which is drying, and bitter. So bitter greens and lots of vegetables, and carbohydrates are quite good for balancing Pitta, but the sweet ones.
What about your Kapha people? They're
Kapha
rocking along
people?
towards Christmas,
Yes.
and they're food lovers, and
They
what
are.
should they be conscious of at the moment?
Well, they're probably really tempted by all the yummy Christmas treats. And it's interesting because they're the ones that can afford to miss a meal, but they never do because they're rock solid, and they know that when it's mealtime you eat, and they love their food. And so for them, it's the kind of food that's going to help, like bitter greens, anything bitter, really good to help the food, fibrous food, to flow through, to get digested, to help their sluggish digestion. Astringent food, to dry them out. So like of the vegetables, asparagus is, so you don't want to have heavy, rich French cooking with cream and lots of oils, because that would aggravate the kapha.
You mentioned, a friend and I were talking the other day, and we talked about having a craving for asparagus. Asparagus was mentioned. Rice was another one that sometimes they just go, just hammer some rice. Or steamed asparagus.
Yeah.
Brussels sprouts was another one as mentioned. So are these little triggers that we're being told you need these because?
Yes. Now that's a really interesting question, because if you are fairly healthy and your body is working well and you're in balance with nature and with yourself, your body wisdom will be really working in your favor. So yes, it's like on a hot day you want to cool down. That's one of the okay times to have an ice cream if you're pitta, okay? But if a kapha, say, on a cold wintry day felt like they wanted some ice cream, had a craving for ice cream, it would be the opposite of what was good for them in that moment, because it's cold and it's wet and it's damp and they need to lighten up and have warm, dry things. And that can be because of those two principles I mentioned before. Like attracts like. So the kapha person wanting the ice cream on a cold day, even if they are sitting by the fire, is like attracting like, and it's going to aggravate the kapha dosha even more. But if it's on a warm day, then it's okay, and especially for a pitta person. So people's cravings can be, like the asparagus could be really high nature, keeping you in tune. But if you're out of balance, it can be doing the opposite. And so it's tricky to know where you are in the picture. But there's, because there's 6 stages of dis-ease. From the very first time that you get a little bit of awareness that your digestion isn't great, and so you might have wind or bloating if vata was getting aggravated, or you might have a little bit of indigestion or heartburn if pitta, the heat is getting too much, or for kapha it might be congested, constipation. Constipation could also be a sign that your vata's out because you're too dry. So once you get the first signs that something's not right, your body wisdom will probably pull you in the right direction. Okay, so you'd know that, yes, that's my inner wisdom and I can listen to that. But if you have gone too far and you actually have got a dis-ease in your body that you're very aware of that's manifesting, sometimes it can be giving you the wrong message. The craving can go the other way.
Yep. So in the pillars we've got diet,
Yeah.
yoga and meditation.
Yoga, meditation, breath work, relaxation, all really powerful ways of bringing you to that point of stillness where you can tune into yourself, because it's often about awareness. You know, being aware of what our body needs is important, and those yogic practices can help you to find that awareness, to find those points of stillness. Lifestyle, really important. So just what we do at what time of the day, you know, so eating at midday we've talked about, getting up before, that in Ayurveda they recommend getting up before the sun rises, because there's a very powerful energy at the beginning of the day, and if you wake up in time to receive that, you're full of energy for the potential of the day. If you sleep in and that takes you into the kapha time of the day, when you do wake up, you can feel really sluggish because kapha energy is heavy and dull. And so you can feel that when you wake up.
So we're looking for that period just before the sun rises?
That's the ideal, and of course it's difficult when the sun's rising at 5:30 in the morning at the moment. See, in when Ayurveda was first downloaded and discovered, it was in tropical southern India, and the periods, the sun sets at 6 o'clock every day and rises at 6 o'clock every morning, and there aren't seasons because it's on the equator. But we don't have that in the West, so we have a huge variance of when the sun rises and when the sun sets. And so our periods of the day get longer in the daytime in summer, you know, so we have more daylight and less evening, and the opposite in winter. So we do have to adjust and balance, because it is difficult unless you've not working or, you know, you have a very free lifestyle to fit in exactly with those times. But yes, not sleeping in bed too long. That can you know, that can not be a great start to the day. And at the other end, making sure that you get to bed in time so that when the fire energy is going, your body can repair, can detox. So the old saying was, my grandma used to say, the hours before midnight are so much more important than the hours after. And now I understand the reason that wisdom came from, and it does make sense.
You practice...
So lifestyle was the second one, and you asked me about the 5 methods, didn't you?
Well, I just wanted to go to Drew Yoga.
Yeah, okay.
Is that the go-to yoga to do in Ayurvedic terms, or tell us about your involvement with Drew? Okay,
so all yoga is wonderful. As I mentioned when we were talking, everything goes back to the same source. Drew Yoga is what we call a heart-based yoga, because it does work on all those 5 layers of the body that I was talking about. So not just your physical body or your energetic body, but your emotional body, your mental body, and your inner self. So it's called Yoga of the Heart because we do a lot of movements that open up the heart, which of course is great for your circulation and your respiration as well. But there's energy centers in the body, and Drew helps to lift up any negative energies as you do the movements, free them. And if the heart is open wide, then that can just flow out naturally without even worrying about it. So you keep your body moving and flowing. It's a very a flowing form of yoga. It works with the breath, so you breathe in as you expand the body and you breathe out as you close the body. So it's just it works well with Ayurvedic principles because you're doing the movements to keep your channels open and clear, to draw in prana, the life force, the breath, and to let go of things that aren't serving you, emotions and thoughts. It helps those processes. And there's also a lot of, we work with relaxation, a good relaxation after you've done the movements, because it's in the still points that we talked about earlier, where your body has time to heal itself and rebalance. So a Drew yoga session will include some activation, which is really great, dynamic movements, which are really wonderful for people whose kapha is aggravated, to do some strong dynamic movements. It has some flowing sequences, which we call EBRs, which means emotional block release. So the very movements are all formulated to release those trapped emotions that are no longer serving you and let them go. And we have normal postures and asanas, and we bring people to still points, which we call the Drew still points. And the beautiful metaphor behind that, Drew is the name of the North Star, and that's the point in the star that stays steady. That's what sailors used to navigate by before we had GPSs.
Yes, yes.
And so we're bringing ourselves back to the still point, which is actually inside us as well, to our own still point. So the star that's within us, that is that wonderful body wisdom when you're healthy and it's working right. And so it's a nicely tridoshic form of yoga, but it's balanced for all 3 doshas. And it's also good as we get older, because it's not about getting into pretzel type postures.
Yeah.
And
like
feeling
this bloke over here.
Yes,
He can the human pretzel.
Wonderful. But it's about just using movement to keep ourselves healthy, really, and being aware of what the movements are doing, being aware of our breath, in the same way that Ayurveda is all about being aware of what you're imbibing, what you're taking in, what's coming at you, what's challenging you, how that's affecting you, and then making a choice to pick things of the opposite quality to balance you. So it does tie in well, but all yogic practices will help with that awareness. Yeah.
I guess picking up this book, one of the things that I was intrigued by but couldn't quite work out was what combination of elements I was meant to be. And I must admit to being a bit confused. Okay. And not being the sharpest tool in the shed, I thought, I'll have to go and ask someone else. Is there a recommended, if we wanted to study further, is there a recommended website or a recommended book or your own writings and teachings? Have you read books, written books about Ayurvedic?
Articles and things? There is a wealth of information out there. And you can, on the internet, there's many quizzes, and I think that book also has a quiz to help you work out what your dominant elements and dosha might be. But the best way to find out what your original nature is, what you were born with, is to go to an Ayurvedic practitioner and they can feel that in your pulses. But what's perhaps more important than what you were born with is what's out of balance now. And yes, you can find out that there's so many sources, like doing a quiz will help you find out, depending on which quiz it is, will help you find out what's out of balance at the moment. So there's very common things that practitioners are aware of that will help us understand what's out of balance in a person at the moment. So going to see a health coach or a practitioner is the really best way to get your unique picture, and they will create a health plan for you with those 5 pathways. So the diet that's going to help bring you back in balance, the lifestyle changes, and maybe only a couple of things will really help. So one of the things would be, they would ask you, what do you love to eat? What do you eat a lot of? And what's your favourite thing to do in the day? And even knowing what those 2 things are, we'll get some insights into where to help you start rebalancing. So Drew Yoga does have a website, and we also have a Facebook page and Insta posts. But there is so many of those quizzes on the website for all people that sell the Ayurvedic herbs. So Banyan Botanicals actually has a wonderful website with lots of practical information and daily information. But there's courses, of course, that you can do, and Drew does run courses. We have some running next year, and you can go to the website to find out when those are on. But I think if you want a personal plan, if you'd like to just look at what couple of changes can I make to set me on that path back to balance, then seeing a health coach or a practitioner is a great idea. So if you have gone a little bit down the path of, let's say you said you've got a few extra kilos, not too many I might say, but just you have to come back slowly down the path that you went to get them to come back to balance. So it's different to allopathic medicine, which goes in with a big bang to cure the symptoms. It's baby steps, gently back in the cycles of nature, unique for you, that nudge you back into balance. And then you can stay in balance.
Mouli, we were talking about breath earlier, and one of the things I've been finding is that when I drive to work in the morning, there's a particular point now of the journey, because I am thinking about what has to happen during the day, and I do get a little bit anxious about that. But I've found that I'm naturally now breathing down into my gut when I come to a certain part of that journey near the roundabout at Barranduda, actually. And what it does is even 10 or 15 long deep breaths down into my gut and long deep breaths out really does sort of set me up, and it has this effect of just saying, no, that's okay, we can do that. What we can do is this, da-di-da-di-da, and it sort of sets you up for the day. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, it's a marvellous practice. Slowing the breath down is wonderful for when we increase the out breath, it switches on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of the fear and flight. So it's very calming and resting and balancing. And relaxation, it brings the relaxation response. And so in slowing the breath down, that's one major thing you're doing. And when you're breathing into the abdomen, you're taking your awareness right down into your base, which is very grounding and settling. So the opposite of feeling nervous. When we're nervous, we breathe just up here. And so taking your breath down into those lower energy centers and balancing the lower energy centers, which the base center is responsible for us feeling secure in the world and steady. And so you're taking the breath into there and calming yourself. It's the most perfect practice. The wonderful thing about the breath is how quickly we can change our mood by just changing our breath. And you mentioned the kids at school. I knew when my son came home kicking his feet up the drive, slumped over, that he hadn't had a very good day. So just getting him to put his school bag down and stand up and take a big breath and lift up his sternum and open his heart. And in a few breaths, he'd be calm and open and happy again. So it changes everything, from our physical body posture to our emotional releases to our thought patterns, and just the breath is an amazing tool for being able to calm. As you mentioned, that fast time at Christmas time, and people are exhausted and tired, just taking that still time and doing a few deep breaths, and wonderful to do it into the abdomen. A lot of people don't know how to do that, but yes, it's a fantastic practice. And in fact, it's one of the big pathways of Ayurveda, working with the right breath for the right person at the right time. There's so many different breaths that we can do, but what your practice is perfect for calming and balancing that slight nervousness about what's ahead.
Well, that's good to know. So I've got good breathing practice. And I've got my morning sorted out with my warm water and honey and ginger.
Awaking
before
if you can.
Sunrise. That's something I'm getting closer to as I get older, I find.
Yes.
When I was a young man, that would never work, but unless I really had to go to work in the dark, but I'm finding as I get older, I'm gravitating toward that time of day anyway.
That's awesome. And going to bed a bit earlier at night time. And so coming naturally into alignment with the natural cycles as your body wisdom is inviting you to.
That midday meal, I've got to sort out what that consists of. It wouldn't be a big beefy thing.
No, well, we don't need a lot of meat, but everyone's diet is different, but a warm, nourishing meal, your main meal of the day, whatever that is. And I think so many people have just had the experience of making that one change in their life, and lots of things come back into balance. And I remember being embarrassed by my mother because she always fed us the main meal in the middle of the day, and all my friends, who I thought were so sophisticated, had their main meal in the evening. And I was saying, Mum, why can't we do that? Why do we always have to have this lunch at dinner? Can't we have dinner in the evening? And she would say, it's so much healthier for us. And she would stick to her guns. And only now, apologies to Mum, do I realise how wise she was.
Does that relate back to the times when people worked more those days, the daylight hours, and then...
You've nailed it. You've hit it on the head, because in our Western lifestyle, I think the invention of electricity has been perhaps one of the biggest causes of dis-ease in our modern world, because we no longer, people used to get up at daylight, do the hard work, come back and have a big meal, then lighter tasks and wind down and get to bed early, and so it went on. But we don't have to do that. We can talk to people in UK when it's our middle of the night and it's their morning. We're not restricted by the daily cycles anymore, and it's not really good for us. You know, we stay up at night time watching screens, and that blue light affects us, and then we can't get to sleep because the melatonin production's been hindered by the blue light, and our cycles are messed up. And so, you know how I mentioned time in nature is really important. A great rebalancer we can do, and this is why people love camping so much, is just to go away for the weekend and not use electric light. And within the weekend, you can reset your circadian rhythm to the cycle of nature and be ready to wake up early and go to bed early. Yeah, so...
There you go. Camping, Jono. Hey, Mouli, it's been great speaking with you today. And in the tradition of Town Crier, Johnny, our director-producer, has produced this beautiful, from the Ras Bihari bookshop, a lovely book gift for you today. And we hope you cherish that and read it at your pleasure.
I most certainly will, and it's been fun talking with you and sharing a few Ayurveda tips and hints.
It has been
Thank
fun.
you so much.
Thank you.
What has John given us? Is it from the Bihari bookshop? Oh, John, just what I need.